Senior running back, Vavae Malapai. Linebacker, Palaya Gayotot. Linebacker, Kanai Mauga. How about a pair of safeties? Talanoa Hufanga and Isaiah Polamau. Wide receiver, Amon Ra St. Browns. Okay, y'all are just trolling me now. That sounds like a Mortal Kombat character. Back with another 2020 college football team preview and game-by-game prediction. And up today on the 4th of July for you. Happy 4th of July. Happy Independence Day. Is there anything more American than a Pac-12 football preview? Well, maybe. Anyway, up today is the Southern Cal Trojans. Head coach Clay Helton. They get their quarterback back, KEDON SLOVIS, who had an amazing freshman season. Can Clay Helton do enough in 2020 to get himself off the hot seat? He's been on the hot seat for a couple of years there. I was kind of surprised he kept his job after last season. We'll see how they can do this year in today's preview and prediction video for the Southern Cal Trojans. Hey, good morning, Internet. It's Uncle Lou here. Yeah, that's right. It's me, Uncle Lou, and I'm live for you on LouTube today. Hey, thanks for watching. I really appreciate it also. And in addition to that as well, subscribe to this channel if you're not already. I post college football videos almost every single day of the year, and yes, some of them are even watchable. Have a safe, happy, and enjoyable 4th of July weekend, everybody. Celebrate America's independence. I hope you have a great time. Be smart. Stay safe. All right, shout out to Enrique R. You wanted to see this Southern Cal preview, sir? Ask, and Uncle Lou will deliver for you. Yeah, appreciate you supporting the channel over on the Patreon page, Enrique. There's a link in the description of this video. If you'd like to join the Patreon page and support the channel and the work I'm doing here with college football year-round, click the link. It'll take you to the Patreon page. You can get yourself signed up. All right, here we go to Southern Cal Trojans 2020 preview and a game-by-game prediction. I'm going to give you a winner and a loser for every single game on their schedule. I'll do my best to explain why I'm picking the wins and the losses that I am. Of course, head coach Clay Helton. Right, he's actually been at Southern Cal going back to, I believe it was 2010. He became the quarterback's coach. 2013, he became offensive coordinator. Twice, he was interim head coach before finally being named permanent head coach back in 2016, I believe it was. But he took over halfway through the 2015 season on an interim basis, went 5-4 in the second half of the season. 2016, his first year officially as the head coach, 10-3. 2017, things heading in the right direction, 11-3. 2018, though, the 5-7 season, and this is where things really started to fall apart for Clay Helton. Last year, rebounded a little bit, 8-5, but let's be real, this is Southern Cal. 8-5, never acceptable out there, especially in the Pac-12 South, a division that's not exactly loaded with top 25 talent. I know Utah's been pretty good. Arizona State maybe has surprised some people, but other than those two, not a lot out there in the way of top 25 teams. There's no other way to describe Southern Cal over the last 2 years other than disappointing. In fact, if you look at their record total over those last 2 years, 13-12. No such thing as a Southern Cal head coach who can go 13-12 in back-to-back seasons like that and not be on the hot seat. So we all understand it's sort of a make-or-break year for Clay Helton. What's going on with the records here? 10-3, then 11-3, 5-7, 8-5. You guys know I like to look at recruiting every time I do these videos. I like to go back and look at the last 4 years worth of recruiting, as the last 4 signing classes is generally what makes up the majority of a team's current roster. I know you got players that leave early for the NFL. You got players that transfer out, players that transfer in, injuries, a whole host of things that can go into making up a team's current roster. But generally speaking, the last 4 recruiting classes will give you a pretty good idea of the amount of talent that a team has to work with. So let's start in 2017. 2017, 4th ranked class in America, 1st in the Pac-12. Same thing in 18, 4th ranked class in America, 1st in the Pac-12. But 2019, we started to see a slide. 19th overall, 3rd in the Pac-12. And then 2020, the class that just ended, unbelievable, 55th ranked class nationally, 10th in the Pac-12, and they only signed 13 players. It's Southern Cal's worst recruiting class since 24/7 first started ranking classes all the way back in 1999. So the worst class they've had in a long, long time. Hard to understand that, and that does not bode well for Southern Cal 2-3 years in the future. The last two classes are heading in the wrong direction. Without a good season this year, could be hard for Southern Cal to turn that recruiting around, especially if they end up keeping Clay Helton. It appears the recruiting is getting worse year by year at Southern Cal. Anyway, 2016, the 10-3 season, right? That's the only season Clay Helton has won his bowl game. Won the Rose Bowl, beat Penn State. That's his only bowl win. 2019, the season that just ended, 8-5. That ended with a loss in the Holiday Bowl to Iowa. So not much success in bowl season for Southern Cal under Clay Helton. You go back to 2016, pretty good team, 10-3. They lost to Alabama that year to open the season, 52-6. And guess who they open up the season with this year? Probably Alabama. I guess that's still technically a little bit up in the air, but everything with college football is technically still a little bit up in the air with the coronavirus. I'm doing all these previews and predictions as though the season is going to go on as planned and as scheduled. I just can't. There's no way I could possibly account for every possibility, every hypothetical situation that may come up. So for the purposes of all these videos, I've got to assume the schedule is being played as normal. We all know that Alabama has been in talks with TCU in case Southern Cal, for whatever reason, can't or chooses not to play that week 1 game. But for the purposes of this video, you play Alabama week 1. All right, let's take a look at Southern Cal for 2019. Like I said, 8-5 didn't go all that well. Ends with a loss in the Holiday Bowl. Can they get it turned around in 2020? Well, new school president, new athletic director, and this makes it even more surprising that they decided to keep Clay Helton. There was a couple of things going on towards the end of the last college football season that had me 100% convinced Clay Helton was going to be out the door. Number one, you had all the turnover administratively at Southern Cal coming out of that scandal involving basically rich people buying their way into schools. You guys know what I'm talking about. I don't need to get into that. That combined with the fact that Clay Helton really wasn't doing all that well, wasn't very popular with the fan base, and you had Urban Meyer basically sitting in your lap. I didn't think Clay Helton was going to be the coach this year for Southern Cal. I think it was a mistake that they didn't get rid of him and do whatever they had to do to go after Urban Meyer. Now, maybe I'll get proven wrong this year and I can come around to Clay Helton, but I really think Southern Cal should have made a big push for Urban Meyer last year. I'm not a fan of Urban Meyer personally. That's no secret if you've been watching this channel for a while, but there's no denying what the guy can do purely as a college football coach. So if you're willing to take that kind of a risk with somebody that you are pretty sure is going to bring along some baggage, especially on his way out the door, that tends to be his MO, right? Does well while he's out of school, but when he leaves, it tends to be a little iffy, going back to, how he left Florida, how he left Ohio State. Anyway, I was kind of surprised they kept Clay Helton, but they did. He's on the hot seat, no doubt. I mentioned 13-12 over the last 2 years. It's got to be the most talented roster in the Pac-12 South. I know Utah has coached really well and had a good season last year, and has had several good seasons. There's not a more talented roster, at least right now, in the Pac-12 South than Southern Cal. Coaching is really the only reason they won't win the Pac-12 South in 2020 if they don't win it. They are clearly the most talented team. We looked at the recruiting classes, and even though the last two have started to slip, 19th and 55th nationally, that 17 and 18 class, those guys are juniors and seniors this year, and that was the 4th ranked class in America and one in the Pac-12. A loaded roster for Southern Cal. Offensive coordinator Graham Harrell switched Southern Cal to sort of more of an air raid offense last year, and it worked, right? They scored a lot of points, a lot of yards. Offensively, they're an exciting team to watch. And of course, KEDON SLOVIS, right, the quarterback, freshman last year, he was the guy that sort of made that go. KEDON SLOVIS is the reason JT Daniels is at Georgia. Let's just be real. He lost a job, transferred out, lands at Georgia. KEDON SLOVIS will be the guy again in 2020, and he's a really good quarterback. He showed that last year in his first year in that system on that team as a true freshman. I think everybody expects him to be even better in 2020. When we look at the wide receivers here in a minute, I mean, it's just talent up and down the roster for Southern Cal at the wide receiver position. But let's start with, let's go to the running backs first. You senior running back Vavai Malapai. I made a joke at the beginning of the video. I'm going to say a lot of these names wrong. Listen, get mad at me if you want to. Don't forget, I've never even seen a college football game, so I don't know how you can expect me to pronounce these unpronounceable names. I'm not any of these kids' parents. I didn't name them, okay? So don't get mad at me for pronouncing their name wrong when they've done everything humanly possible to make it as hard as anyone can, as hard as possible for anyone to pronounce these names. But senior running back Vavai Malapai, another senior, Stephen Carr. Both these guys, good, not great. And that's a theme when you look at Southern Cal's running backs. You got 2 sophomores, too, Marquise Stepp and Keenan Kristen. So 4 running backs that are capable, none of which are great, none of which stand out, none of which have really asserted themselves as the true number 1 running back. You're probably going to see the quote-unquote running back by committee approach from Southern Cal this year unless one of these 4 guys can step up and sort of become the go-to guy at the running back position. I don't think any of these 4 guys are elite, upper echelon, Power 5 running backs. Again, they're all talented. They're all capable. None of them are in that upper echelon of running backs, though. I think we're going to see a lot of all 4 of those guys. Wide receiver, like I mentioned, absolutely loaded. Tyler Vaughns is back. Amon Ross St. Brown, Drake Landon. This kid's a basketball player, too. 5-star Brew McCoy. How will Southern Cal use him this year? That will be interesting to watch. Interesting recruiting deal with him two off seasons ago, but he's with Southern Cal. Will play a lot this year. We'll see how they choose to use him. But Southern Cal, there's not a team in America that wouldn't take Southern Cal's wide receiver group. And there's some other schools with elite ones too. Clemson, Alabama, Ohio State. I could go on, but I don't know that there's a team better than Southern Cal, top to bottom, in wide receiver talent. Like I said, there's a few that are close or equally as talented, but these receivers are absolutely unbelievable. I wouldn't be surprised if all of these guys end up in the NFL. Tyler Vaughns, Amon Ross St. Brown, Drake Landon, and Brew McCoy. That's how talented they are at the wide receiver position. Now, you look at the offensive line, you lose both your tackles. So you got to replace those, and that's never a good situation to be in. Tackles are very important on offensive line. Clearly, they're blocking a team's best pass rushers from the outside, right? You lose your left tackle and your right tackle, but you return the other 3 linemen, the center and the 2 guards. There's some talk in some places that I read that both guards from last year may actually move to the outside, and you get 2 new guards in there in the middle on either side of your center who returns, Brett Nealon. You've got, is this right? 8 freshman offensive linemen on the roster. So you may see some play, and that's a combination of both true freshmen and redshirt freshmen. So you may see some young guys along the offensive line for Southern Cal this year. I would say that's probably their biggest question mark this year is the offensive line. It's great that you have the 3 players back, but like I mentioned, replacing both tackles, never easy to do. You got a lot of talent, but it's young and inexperienced. Running backs, I don't have any questions about your running backs. I don't think they're elite, like I mentioned, but we know what we're going to get. Offensive line is really the only question on Southern Cal's offense to me. I don't see any reason why Southern Cal's offense won't be better than what it was last year. Yeah, you got to replace those 2 offensive linemen, but you get a ton of talent at wide receiver back. You get KEDON SLOVIS back. You get your wide receivers back, the running back, all that kind of stuff. I think Southern Cal's offense can be, or at least has a chance to be, really, really good in 2020. Let's take a look at the defensive side of the ball. You bring in a new defensive coordinator from Texas, right? Todd Orlando. He was the DC under Tom Herman for the first few years out there in Texas. And let's be real, Texas's defense appeared to get a little bit worse each year under Todd Orlando. Maybe that's recruiting. Maybe that's Tom Herman putting too much focus on the offensive side of the ball and practice and recruiting and all that kind of stuff. I don't know, but go back and look at the numbers at Texas. The defense was not nearly as good last year as it was the year before that. It seemed to be heading in the wrong direction. Tom Herman makes a change, gets rid of him. Southern Cal picks him up. So you got Todd Orlando at defensive coordinator. You got to get better on the defensive side of the ball. Last year, Southern Cal gave up 30 points per game. That's hard to imagine. And again, not a lot of elite teams out there in the Pac-12 that Southern Cal is playing. Yes, Oregon was really, really good last year. Yes, Utah was pretty good / real good. Washington was okay. Outside of that, you didn't really have a whole lot to be excited about when you looked at the Pac-12. Mike Leach has been out there at Washington State putting up big numbers, but come on, just in general, to be giving up 30 points per game in the Pac-12, not really all that impressive. Even worse than that, this is an alarming stat here. You hear offenses talk about this all the time, and defenses. What do offenses want to do? They want the big play. They want the explosive play, right? 10-plus yards. And defenses, same thing. They talk about this all the time, too. We can't give up any big plays. Make a team work down the field. Make them earn it, right? Southern Cal was 101st in America last year on defense in giving up plays of 10-plus yards or more. Teams did not have a problem with explosive plays against Southern Cal's defense last year. If I had to pick one area of Southern Cal's defense where they have to improve in 2020, if they want to get where they want to go, it's that stat right there. You need to at least cut that in half. At least. You've got to be at least top 50 in giving up big plays to 10-plus yard plays like that. Let's take a look at who you got coming back and who you lost. I like your defensive line this year, your outside guys and your inside guys. You got this Jay Tufele. Is that his name? I don't know. He's probably one of the best defensive linemen in the Pac-12. I really like him. Freshman All-American last year, Drake Jackson. He's back. He had 5.5 sacks. That led the team. And he had 11.5 tackles for loss. That also led the team. So having him back with a year of experience after winning Freshman All-American last year to go along with Jay Tufele, again with these names. I like what you're doing up front. I like what you have to work with up front. Linebacker position, I've got some question marks. Now, you've got 3 talented linebackers you can play in the middle. All of them have been inconsistent, though. They've had problems consistently being able to, tackle. They just haven't played at an elite level. 1 or 2 of these guys has got to take a huge step forward in 2020. Here we go with the names again, but Palia, Gayotodi, Jordan Losefa, Kanai, Malga, whatever. If you're a Southern Cal fan, you know what I'm talking about. If you're not a Southern Cal fan, you don't have any idea whether I pronounce those 100% right or 100% wrong. You got a deep secondary, lots of talent. Some of it's inexperienced, and again, you've got some holes to fill from last year. But your cornerback in particular, you've got 4 or 5 corners that really could start. Probably going to play a lot of nickel and dime because when you look at the secondary, and really the back half of your defense in general, including linebackers, most of the talent in my mind is in the defensive secondary. So I wouldn't be surprised to see Southern Cal run a lot of nickel and dime to get those more talented guys on the field at the same time back there in the secondary. But you got Griffin, Steele, and Stewart. All are capable corners. One of the best safety duos, in my opinion, in the Pac-12 with Talanoa Hofiga and Isaiah Polamayo. Yeah, those 2 guys. I'm sure everyone knows exactly who I'm talking about. Yeah. All right, so anyway, there you go. My overall impressions of Southern Cal, one of the most talented teams, not just in the Pac-12 South, but in all of the Pac-12. Clearly, they're behind Oregon. Here's the problem when you look at Southern Cal going forward. Southern Cal's recruiting over the last 4 years under Clay Helton has been trending the wrong direction. Meanwhile, you look up the coast at Oregon at what Mario Cristobal is doing up there. His recruiting is trending way upwards. I already think Oregon's a better team than Southern Cal now. Every year that goes by where Southern Cal is recruiting somewhere between 19th and 55th, that gap between Southern Cal and Oregon is getting bigger and bigger and bigger. Southern Cal has got to turn around to recruiting. But in terms of just this year, again, 17, you had the 4th class. 18, you had the 4th class. Those are national ranks, first in the Pac-12. There is a lot of talent on this team. The biggest questions I have about Southern Cal in 2020 before we get to the schedule, Clay Helton. I'm still not a believer in Clay Helton, right? Offensive line, you got to get those guys replaced, and you got to find better play at the linebacker position. I think if you can work all 3 of those things out and Clay Helton ends up having his best year as a head coach, I think Southern Cal has a chance to find themselves in the Pac-12 title game. Let's put the schedule up on the screen and see if it's actually going to happen, though, in 2. All right, here you go, the 2020 schedule for the Southern Cal Trojans. Not an easy schedule in my mind, even in the non-con. 2 really tough non-con games, some tough road games. You start things out, like I mentioned, week 1 in a neutral site game, Arlington, Texas against Alabama. 2016, you were 10-3. You won the Pac-12, I believe, and went to the Rose Bowl. You actually won the Rose Bowl, I believe, over Penn State. Anyway, one of the best years Clay Helton has had. In that same year, you lost to Alabama 52-6. I'm not saying it's impossible for Southern Cal to beat Alabama when they play week 1, but there's absolutely 0 chance I'm willing to predict it in a video like this. The Pac-12 in general has not fared well against the SEC, especially when you look at good versus good, right? Oregon unable to beat Auburn a couple of times last year in particular. Looked like the better team, couldn't find a way to win. The Pac-12 just in general has struggled against elite competition, haven't made the college football playoffs in 3 or 4 years now since Washington made it way back when. I think Alabama will win week 1. Nick Saban is the greatest head coach in the history of college football. Clay Helton appears to not know what he's doing. An entire offseason for Alabama to prepare for this game. As talented as Southern Cal's roster is, particularly within the Pac-12, it does not compare to the talent on Alabama's roster. It just doesn't. I don't see any way Southern Cal wins this game. I think Alabama wins fairly easily. Probably three touchdowns maybe into the second half. We'll see. Alabama might take their starters out. I don't know. But I don't think this will be an interesting game in the second half. I've got you dropping your first one to Alabama. It's not an insult to lose to Alabama. They're one of the best teams in America, but I don't see you getting that done. You come back for your first home game and you play New Mexico to Lobos. You'll get a win there. Non-con game shouldn't give you much of a struggle. Get you back on the good foot there with a win. And you start your Pac-12 schedule on the road at Stanford, another team that was disappointing last year. I'm a huge David Shaw fan. They took a big step back last year. They tried some different things offensively than what we've been used to seeing Stanford do under David Shaw, and it just didn't work. Personally, I'd like to see him get back to the traditional David Shaw style of Stanford football that he's had success with out there. I've often referred to Stanford as kind of an SEC team on the West Coast. How they play, their style of play. We didn't see that last year, and it didn't work out well for Stanford. Southern Cal and Stanford both are two teams that were pretty disappointing last year that I find a hard time believing will be as bad in 2020 as they were in 2019. Tough game on the road. I'm more of a believer right now in Southern Cal's roster than I am Stanford's roster. I'm a bigger believer in Shaw, though, as head coach than I am Helton. This was tough for me because it's on the road, but I gave you the win against the Cardinal. You're sitting at 2-1. Now, then you come back home and play Arizona State. Arizona State is a team that I think has the potential to surprise some people this year. I know Utah's been good in the South and won it last year. Southern Cal, always one of the favorites to win the South. Arizona State is a team I think has a chance to win the Pac-12 South in 2020, and not a lot of people are talking about it. I doubt they're going to be the favorite. I doubt a whole lot of people are going to actually pick them to win the Pac-12 South. But if I had to pick 3 teams that have a chance to win it, it would be Southern Cal, Utah, and Arizona State. This will not be an easy game. I like that you get it at home, but I've got you losing. I think Arizona State, whether they actually win the Pac-12 South or not, I think they're capable of beating anyone within the Pac-12 South. Now, it may be the case that they can't consistently play at a high enough level from week to week to actually beat all the teams in the Pac-12 South, but I think they do it here. They give you your second loss. You're 2-2. Then you got to go on the road and play Utah, and I gave you a win here. Utah loses a lot. They want one of these teams that gets the most out of the available talent they have. They don't recruit at a ridiculous level, but they always seem to put a good product on the field. I don't think that will be any different in 2020. But I think you get the win there. Let me say something about these 3 games here, because these were the last 3 games I picked when I went through and did this schedule. It's very hard, I think, to pick these 3 games that I just talked about. At Stanford, home against Arizona State, and at Utah. I think Southern Cal is capable of winning all 3 of those games. I also think all 3 of those teams are capable of beating Southern Cal. This was a tough 3 stretch of games for me to choose here. The main takeaway I want you to take from this 3 set of games here in terms of what I'm predicting in this video, I think you'll go 2-1. And that's not bad with these 3 games in a row, 2 of which are on the road. I will admit, I am not 100% convinced you will lose to Arizona State at home. I'm not, even though that's what I picked. But I'm also not 100% convinced you'll win on the road at Stanford and on the road at Utah. So if you want to get in the comment section and nitpick about no way we lose to Arizona State, okay, then I think maybe you lose on the road at Utah the following week. The point is, I think you go 2-1, and that's actually pretty good to go 2-1 in that 3 stretch of games, in my opinion. I'm higher on Arizona State than other people are, so I think that would be a good win if you could pull it off. Clearly, Utah probably be a ranked team, and Stanford, I think, will not be as bad as they were last year. 3 tough games. I think you go 2-1 with the loss to Arizona State. But again, just pick any one of them if you want to. Come back home, play Cal. I'm going to give you a win here. I'm not convinced with Cal. They had a surprise win or two last year. I'm not buying in. They're a 6-7 win team, in my opinion. I'm not a buyer on Cal. On the road at Arizona, I gave you a win. Of the 2 Arizona teams, I like Arizona State better. Arizona has seemed to sort of flatline. I'm not sure what's going on out there. Nothing impressive has happened there in the last couple of years, whereas Arizona State has looked at times like they have some potential to take that step forward in the Pac-12. I don't see that happening at Arizona. I've got you winning on the road there. That takes you into your bye week. You come out of that, another home game against Colorado. They got a new coaching staff there. Mel Tucker and company gone to Michigan State in the Big Ten, so they got a lot of work to do at Colorado. They weren't that great to start with. Brand new coaching staff, no offseason to prepare. I think you win without a problem at home against Colorado. You got to go on the road and play Oregon. That's a big fat loss. I don't care that they lost Justin Herbert. They're way better than you in every area of football. They just are. I think they have a better roster and better players than you. They clearly have a better coaching staff and head coach than you. And their recruiting and their trajectory right now is headed this way and yours is headed the other way. You got to play them there. Unless for some reason they've got a quarterback that just is absolutely pitiful to replace Justin Herbert, which I do not think will be the case. I don't see any way you win that game. I've got you losing on the road at Oregon. And you come back home and play Washington, another team that I think is capable of beating you, but you're capable of beating them. It's at home. I gave you the win. The win there. They're replacing a quarterback too and a coaching staff. I think you get the job done at home against the Huskies. On the road at UCLA, city rivalry game. UCLA, well, what are their players doing out there? No one knows. They may have quit by the time you watch this video. I don't know what's going on out there. You got to drive across the street and play them there. I think you win. Yeah, you beat UCLA. And in the last week of the year, Notre Dame. Clearly, Notre Dame can beat you. You're just kidding yourself if you say that they can't. Now, I've already done a Notre Dame version of this video, so if you've seen it, you already know where I'm headed here, but I think you beat Notre Dame. And I think Notre Dame's a really good team. I think I had them at 10-2 with their only losses to you and then at home against Clemson a couple of weeks earlier in the season, second week of November, I believe that Clemson-Notre Dame game is. I think you get a big win at home against Notre Dame, and it could be that this is the win that saves Clay Helton's job, especially if you still decide not to go after Urban Meyer. I think Notre Dame will probably be favored in this game, but I think it will be a good game. You get them at home. I'm going to give you the benefit of the doubt here. This is a rivalry game. We see weird things happen all the time. Would I be surprised if you somehow lost to Notre Dame? No. Notre Dame's going to be a pretty good team. They're going to win at least 9 games, probably 10 or 11. I'll go with 10. But I think you beat Notre Dame at home to close out the regular season at 9-3. Probably not what Southern Cal fans would be hoping for. 12-0, 11-1, 10-2. I get that. But I've got you at 9-3. Now, the good news is you may win the division at 9-3. Now, I've got you losing to Arizona State and beating Utah. So depending on what those two teams' records end up being at the end of the year, we could be into a tiebreak situation. We'll see what happens. But I've got you at 9-3, a record that I do think is good enough to win the Pac-12 South, depending on maybe some tiebreakers, like I mentioned, of what happens with Arizona State and Utah. All right, that's it for the 2020 Southern Cal Trojans. Again, I hope you guys have a great 4th of July weekend. Have a lot of fun. Be safe. And I'll see you guys again real soon. Have a good morning.